Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Leathers, the 2025 Florida Watercolor Society President. On behalf of the FWS Board of Directors, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our Florida Watercolor Society first Thursday demonstration with our Florida Watercolor Society 2025 Judge and Juror Matthew Bird. The title of tonight's demonstration is Lessons in Realistic Watercolor, Pushing Values. Also, special thanks to Rachel Correa for the use of her composition Eminence. You can listen to this on the FWS website, and Rachel invites you to visit her website and listen to her music on YouTube and subscribe to her channel. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our Florida Watercolor Society 2025 Judge and Juror, Matthew Bird. Matthew was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and graduated with honors from the Pratt Institute of Art in Brooklyn, New York in the year 2000. He is a signature member of numerous organizations, including the American Watercolor Society and the National Watercolor Society. He also served as vice president of the National Watercolor Society. His award-winning watercolor paintings have been exhibited in juried shows across the United States, as well as in Canada, China, England, Greece, Hong Kong, and Italy. His work is in museums and private collections. Matthew has been featured in many magazines, including Fine Art Connoisseur magazine as one of today's masters, American Art Collector magazine, the Watercolor magazine as one to watch, the Artist magazine, the Art of Watercolor magazine, and Splash, the Best of Watercolor book series. Matthew lives with his wife and children outside Baltimore, where he maintains his studio. I'm going to read to you now from Matthew's artist statement. The subject matter of my figure and still life paintings communicate my deep love and respect for nature and life. Some paintings stem from a joy or narrative that is from my own experiences. Other pieces reflect the simple beauty I find in everyday objects composed together. I have focused on developing my craft to capture the beauty of what surrounds me with precision and clarity, and strive to convey that to all people through the universal language of representational art. It is my desire that when others see my work, they may be inspired by the perceptible signs of the real creator. And now, let me introduce you to Matthew Bird. Matthew?
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Ron, for hosting us. I'm delighted to be here and always a little humbled to hear those sorts of biographies read, but I'm excited to be working with you all and looking forward to coming down to Florida and doing your show and teaching a workshop. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but we don't have a lot of time, and I'm a very slow painter. So I'm gonna just jump in here and just do a little, I got a small little still life. I'm gonna sling some paint around and take your questions. Feel free to ask anything you want. I'm an open book. But yeah, I get a little nervous during these things because I am such a slow painter. But we'll do the best we can in the time allowed. So I thought that I would do something a little different today, which some people might love, some people might hate. I don't know. I'll talk a little bit more about my work after I get some washes down, but I wanted to just do a little bird's eye view here of an oyster, which is not something I've done before. And I've got this already drawn and masked out here. I use PBO drawing gum for my masking fluid. Several reasons for that, which I'd be happy to go into, but I also don't want to bore you. So feel free to ask if you're curious. But first, I'm just going to throw some water down. I'm going to do this wood cutting board first, which I would consider the background, even though we're sort of looking from above. I almost always paint my backgrounds first. And tend to work from the back of the painting to the front. If there's multiple objects, in this case, it's just one, so that's not really an issue.
Matthew, we have a question from Robin. What is the substrate or paper that you're using? That's also a question from Janine.
This is 300 pounds Fabriano Artistico cold press paper. I am not really one to stretch watercolor paper. I think maybe when I go pro, maybe I'll do that because that's what the real artists do. But I think I'm just too lazy. I just want to paint. So I paint on 300 pound and I don't bother stretching it. I have just a terry cloth towel down on my tabletop and I just paint right on that. And that allows me to just go right off the page like that. I don't have to worry about water bleeding back or backwash or anything that will cause blooms. So yeah, that's Fabriano cold press, 300 pound. I am using mostly Daniel Smith paints. I am a brand ambassador for them. It's not all I use, but it's the bulk of my palette. And I'll have dot cards when I do the workshop with you all that I'll hand out. You can play with.
Matthew, we have another question about your masking fluid. Why did you choose that particular brand of masking fluid for your painting?
I would say consistency. It's always just served me really well. I think I've tried almost all the masking fluid out there. I mean, I've got Sennelier's good. Didn't really like this one. Daniel Smith's masking fluid's pretty good. But the PBO, I guess generally speaking, there's two kinds of masking fluid. There's the stuff that dries clear, and then there's the stuff that has a little bit of a tint to it, which I prefer. And that is because it only takes one time to like mask a painting, and then when you're using that white fluid and you can't see, if you miss a spot, you're in trouble. You know, you can't get that white. Can't really get that white back. I mean, there's some tricks you can use, but generally speaking. So I never want to miss a spot, and I end up. You can either tint your masking fluid with a little dab of watercolor, or just buy masking fluid that already has a tint to it, which is one thing that I do. The only downside to that is sometimes it can tin your paper a little bit. So if you want, that hasn't happened to me very often, but I have seen it if it's maybe on the paper a little bit too long. Can you all see that reference photo well enough? I can switch things up here. If this is, let me know if this is better.
Another question. They're asking it doesn't stain the paper when you take it off?
No, I don't have that
Fluid?
problem. It is a possibility. Um, it doesn't happen to me very often. I suppose if you leave it on for a really long time, maybe if it's kind of baked on with a hair dryer or left in the sun, you might have some trouble with it tinting your paper. It is a possibility. So that is, like I said, that's the downside of tinted fluid. But for me, it's worth it. I've definitely had instances where I thought I had everything I wanted masked, and did some dark washes and found out, nope, I missed something. So this wash I'm putting down, this wood has got lots of different color in it, and I am very consciously trying to put in colors that might even seem unintuitive, just to make it visually interesting. So like this is cerulean blue. I'm adding a little violet. And I'm also working with a number of quinacridinones that I really like. Deep gold.
Matthew, we're having our members ask about your palette. Could you show that very briefly, please?
I can put that back up. Um, for my workshops, I send out a photo of this whole palette with all the colors labeled, including the pigment for each, so that people can, if they don't have every color, they can try to match it.
Matthew, sorry to interrupt again, but where would we find that, please? I didn't hear it.
For anyone who signs up for the workshop, I include it with all my handouts. I could email it to the group after this if you want, if you just want that.
Oh, I think that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yep. So my palette normally looks like this. I don't really clean it off. I think the real artists do that every day. They clean off and it looks really professional, but I keep mine kind of messy. I find that there's just a lot of cool grays and interesting colors that can come from the slop. So all right, I'm gonna let this wash set up. And while that's drying, switch over and I'll for those who aren't familiar with my work, I will just run through some of my still life paintings and kind of give you a high view of my approach. Obviously, I am a very realistic, detail-oriented painter, and hence the very slow nature of my workflow. I often employ these very dark backgrounds, and that's probably one of the questions I get asked the most is how I do that. I do mix a custom black, and I'm pretty sure I'm doing a still life workshop for you all. So I'll be going through that during the class. It's one of those weird things that seems pretty easy to do. It's just a dark background, but actually quite challenging. And a number of these, you'll notice I also incorporate like a bluish underpainting that kind of comes through in parts, which is, oops, back up. Something I do that I just think adds some nice visual contrast, depending on the composition, the blues and the oranges or yellows or whatever it may be, as opposed to just having the background be a flat black, which I also do. Like there. So my work is very much influenced by the Dutch and Flemish masters. Obviously, they were oil painters, but I have found you can get very rich, vibrant colors and darks in watercolor, which is maybe the second most common thing I hear is people are like, "That's watercolor." A lot of you've probably run into this. Non-watercolors have this idea that the watercolor has to look a certain way, which I reject. A lot of these still life setups take me a really long time to think up and get all the items. So I'll often have one or two paintings that I can get from a certain idea. So you'll see that in these next couple slides.
Matthew, someone had asked, how did you approach the dandelion fluff? And I think it was 2 paintings ago.
Yeah, that's way back. I masked out. I masked it out. I masked all of this out while I did the background first, and then there's probably some lifting involved. It's a real push and pull trying to get those darks in there. Also getting soft edges. That was a fun challenge. I've always often thought I would come back and do some more dandelion type stuff because that was a fun one. Yeah, so you can see like the fish. I got 2 fish paintings out of that. So oftentimes, like I was saying, when I have a certain setup that seems to be working for me, I'll add or subtract some things and get a couple of compositions out of it.
Matthew, what classes did you take at Pratt?
What classes?
Or what areas did you study for your degree?
The first year at Pratt is called a foundation year. So I got a really broad base of typography, design, photography, light color theory, all that, foundational stuff. And then I ended up, as I progressed, I went into the commercial side and studied illustration as opposed to fine art because the illustrators were still using live models and drawing, from plaster casts, a lot of the old atelier methods, which the fine art department was less enthusiastic about. So that was my approach. And I studied illustration and started out working as an illustrator.
I'm getting some questions about your dark backgrounds. How do you create those?
I have to show you, but I'll give you. I first do an underpainting. Depending on the composition, it's often a blue or a red underpainting, and then I have a custom black mix that I use. It's 1 part mineral violet, half a part Prussian blue, half a part alizarin crimson, and then a little bit of some earth tones, usually like a burnt orange or quinacridone gold, something like that, to try to neutralize the dark.
What's the
And
average? I'm sorry,
usually,
Matthew. What's the average size of your paintings?
most of them are full sheet, so 22 by 30. Some of these are a little smaller. The biggest I've done is 30 by 40. And that's my most recent one. That's I just sent that to AWS a couple weeks ago. So that's just kind of real quick run through of my style and how I approach still life painting. Let's see if this is dry. It's getting there. The dark backgrounds, to finish answering that question, I usually do maybe four-ish, 3 or 4 layers of the black built up to get it nice and rich. If it's too, if you go on too thick, too fast, it does some gross things. I'm gonna get my palette back up here. What other questions do you have?
You've been doing a marvelous job with the questions. The only other things we're getting are wonderful comments. They appreciate your style. It's not constricted or professional, as you call it, but the result is amazingly beautiful. That was from Maria R. And from S. Fletcher C. He mentioned you do a great job with the dark background, and it's just gorgeous. And it's not opaque or thick. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. I promise I wasn't fishing for compliments. Um, Now you can ask. I mean, you don't have to ask me about painting if you want to ask about shows or framing or shipping or art, art life, whatever. Happy to share my perspective for what it's worth. I'm gonna start trying to put in some. Paper's still a little wet, so I'm trying to put in some wood grain, but it's bleeding a bit. Um, I might hit this with a hairdryer. Let me mute my mic for just a second.
Matthew, are you painting on a towel
Yes,
underneath?
yeah, it's just a terry cloth towel that it probably decades of paint on here. No.
Okay.
Um,
Can you tell us again when you paint the background, is it before or after the other components of the painting?
yeah, I do mine first, which is a little unconventional. Most I mean, traditionally watercolorists will do their darks last. Um, and I've done it that way. You can do your dark background last. If you know Lauren McCracken's work, he paints similar. He does his at the end as as a as his method. Um, but for me, I have always found that my eye and just the way my brain processes value, it really helps me to have that dark down there first. And what I mean by that is if I were to paint the whole painting, all the objects with the white paper in the back showing, everything would look great. The values, the colors would be spot on. It would look amazing. And then I would go and paint the black and realize that my values weren't right at all. And I would have to go back and darken everything on all the objects. And I don't know, that's just me. It's my way of doing it, which is just to say there's not a right or a wrong necessarily, but that's how my mind processes the value a lot better when I have that dark down there first. I can just compare everything else to that. So oftentimes in my workshops, I tell people, you know, there's definitely wrong ways to go about things that will make a mess or screw things up. But there's oftentimes several different paths to get to the same result. And there's not necessarily a right or a wrong technique or approach. So if you prefer to do your backgrounds last, that's fine. I show people what works for me, and I just tell everyone, hey, take the techniques you like and use it in your process, and the stuff you don't like, just ignore it.
Matthew, can you tell us a little bit about your still life, like what subjects you like?
Sure. I will, for my large, my serious works, I will often spend a crazy amount of time thinking about stuff, planning it out, finding the right objects. I'm a little obsessive about it. So, for example, like you could find some cool objects at one of those big box stores like Home Goods or something, and a lot of that stuff, can look cool or it's made to look old, but I'd really like to have the real thing. I'd like to have old things with character, with rust and patina, whatever it might be. Um, so I just say that as an example of I can get a little bit crazy about.
How do you set up and light your still lifes?
Yeah, once I have the objects, usually there's a story or some sort of narrative that I'm kind of building everything around, but um, back behind me, I have a black box bookcase that I use as my sort of stage. And I do sort of think of it as a play, and each item has its own little character, and I'm trying to tell some sort of story. So I go into this a lot more in my workshops, and I have some visuals I could show. So it's kind of hard to like just describe it, but my little black box area, I can put different tabletops down. I can put different back walls in place, and then my studio, it does not have north light, which is the best for artists. So that's unfortunate. I think when I turn pro, I'm going to build a studio that's like really great north light. It's going to be amazing.
Do you prefer to work from a photograph of your arrangements? Or do you prefer just to look at the arrangement as you paint?
Um, so I set everything up, and I do have artificial light to light everything so it's consistent. So I don't have that north light, but yeah, I'll photograph everything. Just because most stuff isn't gonna last long enough for me to paint from life. I'm not opposed to that. That's how I learned. But if you're doing oysters, they're gonna start to smell. Flowers wilt. You know, the magnolias I discovered are like the avocado of the flower world. They turn brown in like an hour. So I find a lot of times a good photo will suffice and save that pristine setup that I've spent so much time creating.
What's your typical day like as an artist? How many hours typically do you spend painting?
Usually my mornings are doing um, the boring stuff or the stuff I don't like. Um, Marketing, bookkeeping, stuff on the computer. Um, and then in my ideal world, my afternoons I paint. So
About about
bef-
how long does your painting usually typically take to finish?
one of my big full sheets can be like a 2 week endeavor. Um, they're laborious, but I do find that most of the time the efforts pay off. Sometimes things go bad, but for you know my kind of realism, it takes me a lot of time to build up the layers that I want, and it is slow. But that works for me. And I'll tell you, I've kind of been like this my whole life. I have a vivid memory of elementary school, my art teacher telling me to paint bigger, use the whole page, don't worry about the details. And I got that pretty much through high school, through art school. But this is what I like. I like detail work. I like working slow and methodically. And um, I don't know. It's just the way God made me.
I've got two questions about your paint. One, did you ever use egg tempera?
Um, yes and no. I'm gonna say no. I've never used the real egg tempera. Um, like Andrew Wyeth, where you're mixing the raw egg with the pigment. I've never done that.
Okay, the other question is about gum arabic. Do you mix that in your colors to make the colors more transparent?
I do not. That might be, I don't know. Maybe somebody does that, but no, I don't add extra gum arabic. I'm using quinacridone deep gold and a little bit of quinacridone sienna right now. They kind of make this wet area really pop up off the dry wood. So this is the trick to this is just pushing that value and making it really differentiate from what's around it. Things just look better when they're wet.
Can you tell us what kind of brush you're using right now?
Yeah, this is a Escoda Perla, Perla. It's a number 6 round. It's a synthetic brush. It's probably, I mean, these are probably my go-to, but I use almost exclusively Escoda brushes. This is my synthetic squirrel mop. This is the Versatile line, which is like a synthetic Kolinsky. I use rounds more than anything else. Darken that down there. Now I have the 2 little highlights masked off there, so when that comes off, it'll hopefully really pop.
Matthew, can you talk a little bit about the decisions for the composition on this particular piece?
Um, yep, I was hungry and I was shucking oysters and I guess just looking down thought it'd be cool to paint it this way as opposed to my normal setup on a table, which I've done. You probably saw at least one of those in the slideshow of an oyster. But I don't know, this was how I was seeing it when I was shucking them. And I did take this oyster and try a couple different things. So here's a finished one that was on a marble slab instead of wood. Um, but there wasn't, I would say, a whole lot of planning or thought behind this. Not like some of my bigger stuff. but there's always little, basic compositional things. I know you're not supposed to put something right in the middle, but sometimes I break that rule. Um, Obviously, the cutting board's parallel, but the wood grain creates a lot of interesting things for your eye to move around. And then once I get this shadow in here, um, it's obviously the light's coming right from right above.
Matthew, do you ever use an absorbing pad or a Kleenex as you're painting?
Yeah, paper towel or a napkin, or yeah, um, more to kind of check my brush to make sure I have the right amount of water going down.
Speaking about brushes, so round brushes are your brushes of choice?
Yes.
One of our members asked, where would you find Discoda Perla brushes? They thought they were rather hard to find.
Oh, you mean they don't just send them to you and they show up on your doorstep?
I guess not. Any recommendations of where they might go?
I go to all the normal places, so Blick, Cheap Joe's, and Jerry's Artorama. I check those three first for art supplies, and then if I can't find what I need, I'll go to Amazon and see if they've got it. Um, but yeah, one of those should have it because that's where I get my stuff.
Why do you prefer synthetic rather than natural brushes?
Just because they're cheaper and um, I can be pretty hard on brushes after a while. If I had my druthers, I would just have a whole studio full of Kolinskis, but you can't get those in this country, at least not easily or legally. Um, but that's what I grew up on. I mean, that's what I learned on was Kolinsky sables, and those are, I would say, are probably the best as far as having a great point and a nice belly that holds a lot of water. You can do a lot of washes without reloading your brush, which I would say is probably the biggest drawback of synthetics is they maybe don't hold as much. Although, last decade, they've really made a lot of progress in some synthetic fibers. So I don't really have any complaints. But when they're new, um, these Perla brushes have a great point. Um, so like eventually they'll wear down, but great point, great for detail work. So that's kind of my workhorse brush. But I mean, whatever works for you, you know. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of a dry brush esque, just to give a little texture. More wood grainy type of look. I'm gonna move on here because you're probably tired of watching me paint wood. So I'm gonna do the old switcheroo here. This one's dry. Um, so I can take this off. Always make sure your paper's bone dry when you do that because you'll tear up your paper if it's wet. So there, that looks cool. Um, Now I'm gonna put this shadow in here. And to do that, I'm gonna wet the paper just with clean water. I'm gonna work wet into wet to get that nice soft edge. This is a dark mix of Van Dyke Brown and Payne's Gray. Pretty, pretty thick, pretty intense. All right. Timing of this is going to be key. So let's see. I can get the light on here. Just this paper's still got a sheen to it. So the whiter it is, obviously the watercolor is gonna go crazy. And as the paper dries, the more control comes back into your wash. If it's sopping wet, you have less control, and it's just gonna go and do cool stuff. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe it's not. This is kind of a fine line where I want a nice soft diffused edge. This is actually called the penumbra of the shadow, where it's fading away. If the light source came down and turned and went really low and this shadow got really long, it would start to fade out and get even softer. But I don't want a hard edge. So that's why I'm wetting the paper first. Sheen's gone. And we'll see. Yeah. So that's not doing anything. I need to get more water on here. Do less talking and more painting. I won't mess it up. So this is too wet. So I'll show you, I'll put it down just so you can see, but it's bleeding way more than I want it to. Literally watching paint dry. So entertaining. I know you guys are gonna want your money back, right? We just watched paint dry for an hour. That's all we did. All right, so looks like that's cool. I like what's doing down there. Looks like I somehow didn't wet enough over here, so I need to add a little more moisture.
Matthew, are you painting on a flat surface or is it at an angle?
This is flat. I would say 90% of the time I'm painting flat. I will paint at an angle for large gradated washes. I will paint upright on an easel, usually towards the end of a painting, especially if it's really large. It's hard to work flat on like a really large sheet because you get distortion. So I'll use an easel for that. And just detail work, it's easier just to step back and see the whole painting. Sometimes if it's on an easel, but yeah, most of the time I am painting flat. Well, that's kind of cool. Um, so the more I mess with it, the more I can screw it up, right? So sometimes you just got to know when to let it be, let the watercolor do its thing. Um, so as much as I'm tempted to mess with it, I probably shouldn't, but I want to. A little more texture. My brush is sort of just skipping around the surface of the paper here. It's not a loaded brush, but I'm using the cold press to my advantage, and um, the raised portions of the paper will catch some of that pigment, and um, brush will just sort of skip over some of the other parts. And that, if you're working on organic stuff, wood, rocks, stuff with texture, that can be one way to get some texture in there. I gotta tell you, I'm excited to come down to your, do you call it a convention or a conference?
Yes, officially it's the Florida Watercolor Society Convention. And we also have a trade show as well.
Heard good things about it, but being an outsider, I've never participated, so this will be fun.
Yeah, we are really looking forward to having you come down for your workshop.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. You got a great group. when I'm doing long lines like this, you could use a rigger brush. Um, which looks like this. It's got a very long, um, you can get really long. It was designed to do rigging on ships, ship paintings, so that's why it gets its name. Holds, enough paint to get a nice long thin line, but I don't know. I don't always reach for it, and what I tend to do is um, sometimes I see my students trying to do straight lines and they're using their fingers to try and do it, and that just kind of gets wobbly. What I end up doing is using my whole arm and kind of like leaning into a stroke, and it gets much smoother and straighter that way than just trying to use your wrist or your fingers.
This is a question about your workshop, Matthew.
Yeah,
Will you be allowing your workshop attendees to use their own reference photo, or will you be using one of your own images for them?
I provide an image and a reference drawing and reference photos, and um, if someone feels confident enough to do their own, that's fine. Um, I'm always happy to try and work with folks. It's a little bit hard because, they're usually doing something much different than what I'm doing. But yeah, I try to be flexible. But I do provide everything for those who want to just follow along. My workshops will generally, I'll do like start to finish on a painting. Um, and um, I mean, hopefully, who knows? Hopefully you leave with a nice painting to take with you and hang up. Um,
Matthew, do you prefer to have the image drawn prior to the event? And if you do you send it ahead of time?
I do, yeah. It's up to you. Yeah, everything will be provided. All the handouts you get ahead of time, and it's probably better if you can come with your drawing prepped, just so you can focus more on painting. I'm doing 4 days, right?
Yes, you are, Matthew.
Um,
Starts on Monday and it goes Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
yeah. So it might be beneficial to you to have your, if you want to just focus on the painting, to come with that drawing prepped and ready to go. And like I said, I give you the reference, not just the photo, which I encourage people to work from the photo because everybody sees differently. But I also show you my drawings. If you wanted to just use that as a guide, you could use my drawing as well. Um, and then, yeah, day one, I always help people with their drawing if they need it.
Matthew, when you're putting down your masking fluid, what kind of applicator do you use?
All different kinds. Um, it's a good question. So I use just an ugly brush. This is one that I'll use. Um, it's just really old. I will also use a dip pen sometimes for really fine stuff. So this is old fashioned dip pen. Um, Another tool that I will sometimes use is a ruling pen. So this is an old drafting tool. You can turn this knob and it'll uh, make this wider or thinner. And you dip it into your fluid and a little reservoir will form here between these two metal guides. So you can get really thick lines or thin lines. But this is nice because you can use it against a straight edge and get really straight lines. What else? Oh, I mean, I'll use different brushes too. So like toothbrushes for splattering, or I'll use the rigger brush for longer lines. Um, there's whatever I need, whatever tool I need to use to get the result that I want. But masking fluid can definitely screw up your brushes. So um, just be mindful of that. I use a lot of masking fluid for my style. I guess I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. But yeah, I'm jealous of the watercolors that can get amazing results without any masking fluid. But I certainly rely on it. I'll use soap. So I'll take my ugly brush. I never use a good brush with masking fluid because it will mess up your brushes. But if you run it through some soap, it'll prolong your brush life, and rinse your masking fluid out of your brush frequently because that'll help too. It will definitely gum up your brushes. And you don't need any fancy soap. That's a Skoda brush soap, but you can just use Dove or Dawn dish soap or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. So let me take off this dry enough. I can show you the dip pen, how that works.
Matthew, once you've taken off the masking fluid, how do you soften the sharp edge?
Well, sometimes I want a soft edge, I mean a hard edge. So the edge of the shell, I will leave as is. But yeah, for like some highlights or, there's definitely a telltale sign of using masking fluid because that edge is always very hard, very crisp. And it's like, oh, definitely use masking fluid there. So to disguise it, if I'm trying to, I'll use I believe this is a filbert brush. It's a synthetic. I've always thought of this as more of an oil or acrylic brush, but it's got a lot of spring to it. And it's a stiff synthetic with a round, it's not quite flat, but it's a great scrubber. And so I will just wet this brush a little bit and then scrub to soften edges that I want softened after masking fluid. So yeah, that's part of the love-hate that I have with masking, is that it always, it leaves its mark. So I'm always looking for ways to sort of disguise or make it not noticeable. When a technique becomes like the main thing, I'm less enamored with it. I don't want the painting to be about a technique. I want it to be about the painting. So let me show you the dip pen that I use. It'll just hold a little bit in the belly there, and as you push down, you can kind of control the flow, whether there's a lot or little that comes out. And so for really, really small areas, I just find this to be slightly easier than using a tiny brush. So it's good for little dots like that, but maybe a brush would be too clunky. But it doesn't matter how teeny tiny or delicate or fine line I think I've got it. It inevitably, no matter what, whenever I, do my washes and then take the masking off, it always just looks so clunky and thick and amateur hour. When I go pro, I'm gonna be really good with masking fluid. I'm a real artist. I'm gonna be able to like knock it out. It's gonna be great. No, seriously though, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It just there's something about it that when you take it off, it's like, whoosh. So there's always a stage of cleanup to try to make it look better. So you can see that if I get closer up here. There's like, if I push down, you see how that opens up? It's very much like the ruling pen, where those metal tongs can be wide or thin, depending on the amount of pressure you have. Um, so, I mean, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not hard to use. It does give me just the right amount of control. Um, some masking fluids come with like their own built-in like nib or um, like this. And you squeeze it out, but I have just had disaster happen after so many times where you're trying to do like a really fine line, but it just you know oozes out, and there's just not a lot of control um, with an applicator like that. So no, this is one tool that I've, and along with the ruling pen, that I think is handy. You might want to try if you're not familiar. All right. Well, I'm not going to finish this, obviously, but we'll do a little more. Maybe I will wet this first. Just water. Right. This is still wet. I almost made a mess. Maybe I'll do a different part while I'm waiting for that to dry. I'm using some weird colors here, phthalo turquoise and imperial purple. I don't like with the wood. I just like to throw in some interesting colors into my darks just to make things more interesting. And that that is something I go into a little bit more in my in-person workshops. Is mixing really rich darks that are full of life and vibrance. Um, it is kind of a pet peeve of mine when
Matthew,
people just flat blacks and lifeless darks.
could you
Yeah,
show
good.
your palette, please?
Oh shoot, sorry.
Thank you.
Oops. Any other questions out there? Is it
Um,
out there? Has everyone left? And I'm just
no, you have a large number of our viewers, so we're really
okay.
thrilled. You've got an amazing audience. Um,
He's slow.
what
I'm leaving.
comment is your split screen video setup? What are some of the equipment you use for that?
Um, Yikes. I have three cameras. Um, they're all really old. Um, they are running into a ATEM switcher. I'm running a MacBook Pro laptop with my software for streaming.
Matthew,
Uh,
I'm getting a lot of really positive comments about your painting, which is wonderful. It looks like we may not finish. Do you have a picture of your final painting that you could share with people online?
I can show you right now. I'm going to do the old Martha Stewart switcheroo.
Okay. And on your 4-day workshop, are they going to work on one piece or a different piece each day?
We will do one painting throughout. Um, it will most likely, unless I get like a request or something, I'll do a traditional still life with a dark background. And then if there's time, I'll also show on the last day maybe how I do um, the light backgrounds with soft shadows and stuff. Here's the finish. And And I can send you a picture of that if you want to include it in your email or whatever. That's it.
I got a one-word response. Wow, it is amazing.
Thank you. So that's something a little bit different. Hopefully that's cool with y'all. But it also kind of shows how just a small little, this is like 6 by 6. And once that gets framed up, you know, it'll be a nice little painting. It doesn't have to, not everything has to be a full sheet masterpiece. But it is fun. I like to do this kind of little things between bigger paintings just to keep the brushes, you know, wet. And while I'm working on ideas and things, I do some practice stuff like that. So, yeah, so for the workshop, we'll do one painting, start to finish. And hopefully by the end of it, you get a nice thing to take home.
Matthew, thank you for a wonderful watercolor demonstration, and thank you for your patience with answering all the questions. It was truly a privilege to watch your demonstration tonight, and I am thrilled that you'll be our 2025 Florida Watercolor Society judge and juror. Now, Matthew will be teaching an in-person 4-day workshop this fall. His workshop is titled Lessons in Realistic Watercolor. We hope to see you there. Please sign up early as space will be limited. More details about our workshops will be available on the Florida Watercolor Society website soon. Thank you so much for attending. I hope I got to all of the questions. If I did not, I'm very sorry. I really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm about the demonstration tonight. And Matthew, again, thank you. Any closing words?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to share. And if there were questions that were missed or I didn't get to, people can feel free to email me. Or if you want to email me, either way, I'm happy to go over anything that I maybe didn't cover or there's questions that were missed. That's fine. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing many of you when I come down.
Thank you so much. And for our Florida Watercolor Society members and our attendees, we look forward to seeing you at the next demonstration. Please check our website for details. You all have a very good evening, and Matthew, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have your demonstration today.
My pleasure. Thank you.